Hello and welcome to the Election Corner on One Man Think Tank. Everyone's talking about it, so let's also talk about the new Georgia polls that have been released. Yes, done by Survey USA, sponsored by WXIA TV Atlanta. Now, the really important thing about the Survey USA polls is they are, in practice, the first good polling we've had of the two Georgia runoffs after the election. We had a lot of Georgia runoff polling that was done pre-election because we knew the runoff election for the special election was guaranteed to happen due to the fact that the votes were split in such a way no one could get 50%. Now, we weren't 100% whether or not the main election between Republican Perdue and Democratic challenger Ossoff would go to a runoff election, and it did, barely. Perdue barely dropped below the threshold in question. Now, there have been two other polls done for both of these races, as well as one Republican internal for the Warnock-Loeffler race. We're going to ignore the internal. One of the polls was done by Remington Research, which is a right-wing group, which of course showed the Republicans in the lead by about, I think, maybe 6 points and 4 points respectively, or 3 points respectively. Then another one done by something like Insight USA or Insight Polling, which didn't really tip the scales. It showed the races were close, and neither candidate was breaking 50%. What's key about this point with the Survey USA poll is it's showing the Democrats both breaking 50%. Sorry about that, just had to take a brief bit of air. Now, right now they have this kind of usual breakdown which shows, shockingly, Republicans, classic base white voters and men give Republicans an advantage, and Democrats, classic base of blacks and women, give Democrats an advantage. It also confirms that those under 50 break more for the Democrats, but those over 50, while they do break for Perdue, do not break for Loeffler. Now, let's go into the actual data itself. And while I'm scrolling down to the category I'm actually looking for, I'm going to tell you something really important here. The polling's not wrong. We just need to be careful. Every person who reviews polls falls into this terminology of saying whether or not a poll is right or wrong. That terminology is bad. The terminology we should be using, and I will try and use from now on, is the polling accurate or inaccurate? And in this case, Survey USA was pretty accurate when it came to Georgia. We need to view every set of polling as a consolidation of all of the numbers with their biases acknowledged. In my opinion, the big issue that's turned up in 2020 and also in 2016 is it didn't properly factor in the urban-rural divide. Education really screwed up 2016, but I think urban-rural divide, and they undercounted rural voters. I think that was a really big factor in all of this. Now, there are many things which are going to be a factor, but I'm just going to show you the key takeaways I have from this, and you can draw your own conclusions from there. So, first, the most important one out of this is, so Georgia's going to run on, he's going to have a runoff. Are you going to vote? This ranges from not sure to certain. There's a second not sure, and I think this is a case of, they have two not sures, so I'll just kind of consolidate them. But when we look into this, despite the fact the Democrats are leading in this poll, it does have some bad news for Democrats. In the sense of, where is it? Okay, so people who voted in the following election. So keep in mind, not voting at all in this one. Maybe not voting, probably not. Probably voting, definitely voting. Middle ground, not sure. Democrats are overall looking like they have a lot more people who are not going to show up for them. by default. Because as you can see in all of the races, except for the special election, which is interesting, they are losing support. They are losing about 5% of what they had at least, while Republicans are only losing around 4% across the board. But maybe about 5% in November in the special election. However, there are a higher number of Republicans who are considering not voting than Democrats, meaning if we just took these numbers as they are right now, this is overall a benefit to the Democrats. However, this comes down to the fact that there are more Democrats who are unsure, which results in, once again, in every race except for Warnock, and this is really important, except for Warnock, Democrats are behind the Republicans in turnout, and they need to be ahead of them. They need to have more people who voted in November turning out than the Republicans. That is the only good way they can really make up the vote tally for the November regular election. Democrats shouldn't be super worried about the special. They should put money in and do that, but the seat they need to worry about is the regular vote. Because as we go down here to how are people voting for in this election for the normal runoff, let's take a look. People who voted for, so this is the regular, 100% of people in the regular who are voting for Perdue are voting for Perdue. However, 6% are voting for Warnock, or say they're going to vote for Warnock in the special. Only 3% say they're going to defect from Perdue to, so 6% of people who are voting for Warnock are voting for Perdue. And that's not good. Oh, shoot. Sorry about that. An alarm of mine went off, telling me I should record a video. Now, here is why these numbers are, let's just say, uncomfortable for the Democrats, because they aren't getting that much crossover from those who are voting Loeffler. Now, this is good news, because if we hop down here, we can see that 97% of people who are voting Ossoff are voting for Warnock, and 7% of people who are voting for Perdue are voting for Warnock as well, while only 2% of Ossoff voters are going to Loeffler. That is great for the Democrats. That's the type of crossover they want. The problem is, they need to get some of these Perdue voters who are voting Warnock in a split ticket to go to Ossoff. Otherwise, they will lose. Because, like I said, and this poll showed the Democrats ahead. However, Warnock's actually in a comfortable position, while Ossoff is just barely breaking 50%, and in a tight race, he will lose. Democrats need turnout in their favor, and the problem is, there's still a lot of split-ticket voting going Perdue-Warnock. So how can the Democrats fix this? Frankly, there's one key thing I'm noticing in all of these numbers. So already we know there's a high number of people who will be voting by mail this election. There were nearly 1 million mail-in ballots sent out by the time of close of sending out mail-in ballots, or request, I think, by the end of the request period. And there's a considerable ground effort to register young voters and African-American voters. But if I can find it, not Kemp, not Biden, why aren't you voting? Here's where it's really important. So let's look at believe the process to be rigged, party affiliation. 20% of Republicans who aren't voting say they think it's going to be rigged. 25% say they're not interested. If you want to know where the Trump voters went, this is where they went. Trump's efforts to discredit the election are hurting him more than you guys, than the Democrats. However, for the Democrats, what are the two biggest reasons? They don't believe your vote matters, and they don't like the candidates. And also, make a note here. Intentionally boycotting the runoff is separate. The voting process is rigged, is what got support. Not, I'm intentionally boycotting the runoff. Don't put money in these boycotts. Put money in the, Trump is saying the election is stolen, and that makes me not want to vote. But for Democrats, what they really need to do is they need to get this solid, almost 50% of people who aren't interested to turn out. They need to make Warnock and Ossoff look like fun guys you can hang around with. And if it's ideological, people won't turn out for them, but throw some bones into the room. So have Biden be their proxy for policy. So if you're worried about looking too progressive, have Biden say he's for X amount of student loan forgiveness, and for the conservatives, have him say, I'm going to I don't know, do a better trade deal with Europe, type thing. And not believing their vote matters, that's just a flat, you need to run campaign ads about how close these elections were. So, those are the final results of this poll. Everything else here is interesting. It's definitely worth a read. You can find it on Survey USA's website. But overall, oh my goodness, did someone light the highway on fire? Dear God. But those are the big three things you need to take away from this. One, that Warnock overall has a good advantage, but Democrats are suffering from the fact that there are a lot of Purdue voters who are crossing over to vote Warnock. And it seems to be that direction. Not Warnock voters are going to Purdue voters are going to Warnock, so you need to win them over. And second, that was second. And third, Democrats need to focus on getting out the vote of people who aren't going to show up. If they can temper some of the Purdue vote, that's great. But their biggest priority is getting more voters out, because that is the greatest source of untapped potential for them. So with that all being said, if you like the video, drop a like down below and also leave a comment. If you want to hear more from the channel, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you want to hear from me outside of YouTube, I have a Twitter at OneManThinkTan1, the Roman numeral, link in the description below. And, as always, and most importantly, have a wonderful day.